Open your eyes and experience the magic.
Cats 2019 is great. It's full of entertaining musical numbers, catchy tunes, unique set design, pretty intricate, complex performances. But
get closer to the magic of the best-loved musical of all time.
Cats is terrible. Every choice it makes is wrong. Furry James Corden gets hit in the groin. It probably shouldn't exist. You know, I wasn't gonna do a video this month. I was just gonna relax and enjoy, the end of the year, and then this happened. What is Cats? Well, Cats is Cats. Cats 2019 is a film based on the Andrew Lloyd Webber musical of the same name. The stage musical originally premiered in 1981 and eventually got a home video adaptation in 1998 after years of commercial success.
Cats, available for the first time ever on video.
This musical was in turn based on a series of poems by T.S. Eliot called Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats, first published in 1939. If you're familiar with the musical, or now the film, you'll quickly realize that the lyrics throughout are taken almost verbatim from many of the poems, with a few characters and musical numbers added. So, what is Cats 2019 about? Given that it's based on a musical based on a very loosely connected series of children's poems, the plot is thin, to be generous. The basic premise of the musical is that this group of cats, known as Jellicle cats, gather together so that Old Deuteronomy can make what is called the Jellicle choice. This choice allows one cat to die and be reborn in a new life. All of the cats want this for some reason. They introduce themselves as contestants to become Old Dute's Jellicle choice. McCavity, the antagonist of the musical, wants this very badly and will do anything to become the sacrificial cat. Dute eventually chooses an old performer who was taken in by McCavity and is now shunned by the Jellicles, called Grisabella the Glamour Cat. She is sent to the Heaviside Layer and is presumably given a new life. Cats do have 9 lives, right? I guess Gus, the nearly dead theater cat, is just out of luck, huh? Does this sound like nonsense? Well, it is. The poems are whimsical musings about the natures and sociologies of cats intended for children. Andrew Lloyd Webber's musical, however, adds drama, danger, pathos, an uncomfortable amount of mewing and crawling and dancing and skin-tight leotards and drooping tails and kind of weird sexual tension between the cats. The musical is bizarre and completely over the top, from its costume design to its set design to its actual musical numbers, but it's also oddly engaging and certainly never dull. So given all of this, how would someone adapt this cheesy, over-the-top, a little bit too horny 1981 musical for modern movie-going audiences? Well, if you have any ideas, maybe you should let Tom Hooper know. Is it Tom Hooper or Toby Hooper? I always get those two confused. The best way to adapt Cats for the big screen in 2019 is don't. Just don't do it. There are other things you could do with $95 million. Yes, Cats cost almost $100 million, and at the time of recording has only made about 15% of that back. The next best thing, I guess, is whatever Tom Hooper did. So let's go over that, shall we? The problems with Cats 2019 are numerous, a few of which stem from the original musical, but many are solely on Tom and his team, baby. The music, lyrics, plot, and characters were always going to be weird and nonsensical. I mean, it's Cats, the scourge of Broadway. The film valiantly tries to inject some character arcs into the film and cut down on some of the introductions and dance sequences, but some of the lyrics no longer line up with the characters given the changes. McCavity, tall and thin, Mr. Mistopheles, aloof. That doesn't really make sense anymore. So in that sense, I can't really blame the movie for having a character named Rum Tum Tugger. But in a musical filled with ballet and complex choreography, Hooper and co. opted to cover the actors with digital fur.
We've used digital fur technology to create the most perfect covering of fur.
The result is startlingly uncanny and nightmarish, seeing human faces float on top of semi-cat heads, flesh, hands, and feet melting into fur. You never really adjust to the way they emote or move. If you look away from the screen for a minute and look back, it hits you again that none of this makes any sense. This heavy emphasis on computer-generated fur also causes any physical performance to lose potency because the characters never look real. The dancing and stunts, often further obfuscated by wirework and fully CG bodies, look fake even when they're real. Victoria's dancing throughout the film is no doubt impressive, but it looks flat, sterile, and pre-rendered, so even her meticulous performance is drowned out by the roar of the river at the bottom of the uncanny valley. Another technical issue with the movie is that much of the singing was done live on set, as with Tom Hooper's Les Mis. In that film, it was presumably done to aid with the realism befitting the setting and to capture the live emoting that lip-syncing can't quite match. But with Cats, they're half CG cat people singing nonsense lyrics. It doesn't need to be realistic. The sound mix always feels off because of this. None of the big, bombastic numbers from the musical really feel big, as the backing tracks sound like karaoke reproductions. The mix sounds thin and mismatched compared to performances that are done fully in studio. Compare the film's version of Beautiful Ghosts,
all that I wanted was to be wanted,
with Taylor Swift's version from the soundtrack.
all that I wanted was to be wanted.
The two different environments that the vocals and instrumentals were respectively recorded in just don't mesh well. The singing itself is often well done, but again, the film gets in its own way in that respect, blunting much of its impact. Now, I could go on, but do these critiques really matter? Does anything really matter? Why is the camera handheld and shaky most of the time? Why is the neon lighting from the various buildings there? Why do two separate people on two different occasions get hit in the groin? Why do some cats wear clothes and others don't, and then some of the ones that wear clothes take off their clothes, so now they're definitely naked?
Cats.
The problem with critiquing Cats 2019 is similar to the problem with criticizing something like The Room. Yeah, you can point out that everything it does is bad on a technical and performance level, but these problems, these criticisms, don't actually take away from your enjoyment of the piece, but it actually is the reason why you enjoy it. It's so bad it's good in that sense, because these problems actually increase the fun you have while watching it. I haven't laughed at a movie as hard as I did at Cats in years. Many comedies aren't a quarter as funny and uncomfortable as Cats. It was made with so much heart and intensity and care that watching it flail about miserably is bewildering. Cats repeatedly use real magic. Objects change size and the perspective is never certain. It leaves you so stunned you just have to laugh.
That's what I say to you.
When McCavity says his own name and disappears into dust, my audience was audibly confused at both showings, a mixture of huh? And laughter just filling the room. Absolutely none of the jokes land. Both audiences were completely silent during Bustopher Jones's fat, shamey jokes and Jenny Anydot's brief dance sequence and cat puns.
Right, well that's not going to work, is it?
Cross pause.
These joke segments were the few moments throughout that didn't get laughs. When Cats isn't unintentionally making you laugh, though, it's scaring you. And I think this is where Cats 2019 and the audience reaction to it get really interesting. Watching Cats is easily as unsettling as any horror released this year, like The Lighthouse, Midsummer, It Chapter 2. It's Suspiria, but furry. The environments are claustrophobic and surreal, and it's hard to tell when and where scenes are taking place. The film also somewhat follows the formula of the slasher. Characters are picked off one by a mysterious antagonist throughout according to a seemingly random or moral criteria. At least its trailers hinted at the weird abominations we'd be seeing, but still, I'm sure many people walked out, because Cats is a prime example of Freud's theory of the uncanny. I went over this in depth in another video, so you should go watch that vid if you want a more thorough explainer. The inability to tell whether characters are human or not is a big component of the uncanny, always leaving the viewer with an uneasiness and uncertainty. The weird human-cat hybrids are uncanny not just because the blending and lighting aren't perfect, but because the concept itself is off-putting. No amount of patching or fixing the CG is going to make them less weird to watch. Corpses and creatures that look lifeless also confuse our sense of being alive itself and leave us feeling dread, and boy, do the cats in this movie look lifeless a lot of the time. The familiar but not quite familiar setting along with these elements contribute to a horrible, creeping, uncanny experience. Watching Cats is also a sublime experience, literally. There are moments throughout the movie that are so confusing and disturbing that they elicit the same visceral responses as seeing Saturn devouring his son. The Romantics strongly embraced the literary sublime and its frequent appearance in nature and used it to great effect. There's a blurry terror in Cats barely contained at the edges of the film, much like the Romantics' use of the sublime. According to Edmund Burke, terror is, in all cases whatsoever, the ruling principle of the sublime. The sublime gestures beyond ourselves, beyond our rational understanding. The sublime is not necessarily aesthetically pleasing, and Cats sure isn't, and can in fact be quite grotesque. It is that which evokes our most powerful emotion, terror, which leaves us in fear and awe, which enthralls us and threatens to destroy us. Looking over a steep precipice evokes this feeling, as do some of Goya's paintings, David Lynch's films, or the Planet Earth series, to name just a few examples. The concept of God and the spiritual experiences linked to divinity are often associated with the sublime as well. The omnipotence and unthinkable vastness of the Judeo-Christian gods sits squarely in the corner of the sublime. This movie often borders on the sublime, on the spiritual. Of Infinity, Burke mentions, it has a tendency to fill the mind with that sort of delightful horror which is the most genuine effect and truest test of the sublime. This delightful horror is maybe the best descriptor there is for Cats 2019. The film is constantly astonishing, so much so that my mouth barely closed for the entire runtime. For Burke, the passion caused by the great sublime is astonishment, and astonishment is that state of the soul in which all its motions are suspended with some degree of horror. The mind is so entirely filled with its object that it cannot entertain any other. To watch Cats is to willingly submit yourself to a kind of madness, to fill your brain with shrieking digital fur technology.
It's digital fur technology.
There's a scene where the cats gather in a graveyard to explain the naming of cats, chanting under the moonlight set to nearly atonal music. Victoria reaches up to the moon, performs an esoteric dance, and receives unspeakable knowledge from it, her third name. You see, Jellicle cats have 3 names. The names humans give them, their unique name like Munkustrap or Jenny Anydots.
But above and beyond, there's still one name left over, and that is the name that you never would guess. The name that no human research can discover, but the cat himself knows and will never confess. When you notice a cat in profound meditation, the reason I tell you is always the same. His mind is engaged in a rapt contemplation of the thought of the thought of the thought of his name. His ineffable, effable, ineffable, deep and inscrutable singular name.
My mind immediately related this scene to another piece of popular media that borders on the sublime. From Software's Bloodborne is one of a handful of games to truly capture the feeling of the sublime. It uses elements of gothic and cosmic horror to make you feel small, helpless, in awe, and terrified of the things around you that you can't and maybe shouldn't understand. In this sense, Cats has more in common with Bloodborne than Les Mis. I half expected to hear someone mention the Old Blood or Uden Chapel at some point. Father Gascoigne and Micolash could be Jellicle names.
But if you spot any cats with their wits about them, tell them about this here Jellicle Chapel. They'll be safe here. The incense wards off the dogs.
Here, see if you can tell whether this description is for Cats or Bloodborne. A huge moon looms over a ritualized long night. Ineffable words and names inscribe themselves in characters' minds as they commune with the moon. Strange, hairy beasts slink loudly along dark Victorian alleys, the creatures all longing for either morning or death. Trick question, it's both. Both the sublime and the uncanny are common elements of horror media, which is why it's so striking to see them employed, albeit accidentally, in a PG-rated musical. Entering the theater to see Cats is akin to stepping into a Bosch painting, like jumping straight into the delirious fires of hell and meeting all the demons one by one as they welcome you in song. It's a phantasmagoric nightmare gospel that should never be. All of your heroes are profaned as Gandalf hisses and drinks from a dish, and Dame Judi Dench lifts her furry legs in the air in approval. Rebel Wilson unzips her fur to reveal some clothes and another layer of fur underneath. Where does it end? So much happens that you can hardly recall it, and yet you can't stop recalling it. It sears itself into your psyche and then disappears in a puff of smoke. It connects with you on an unspeakable, incomprehensible level. You can never shake the feeling that something's off, but you can't look away. That these fun jokes and dances and songs are obscuring something deeply, deeply wrong. Something that it wordlessly wants to show you.
That we live on a placid island of ignorance in the midst of black seas of infinity, and it was not meant that we should voyage far. The sciences,
Digital fur technology,
each straining in its own direction, have hitherto harmed us little. But someday, the piecing together of dissociated knowledge will open up such terrifying vistas of reality and of our frightful position therein, that we shall either go mad from the revelation or flee from the deadly light into the peace and safety of a new, dark age. Hell is empty, and the devils are all at the Jellicle Ball.
And we all say, oh, well, I never was there. Oh, well, cat's so clever as magical Mr. Mistopheles.
Encounters with the sublime are rare, and not what you expect when you go see a musical. I think this helps explain the wildly differing reactions that Cats has garnered. This is not a middling film, whether you enjoyed it or not. It causes strong reactions, as Burke says, the strongest being terror. I highly recommend seeing it, especially if you want to watch a train wreck on screen or you enjoy so bad it's good type movies. Why? No, why are you doing any of this? Why did you choose this? Why is Judi Dench looking right at me? It's so particular and so peculiar that I can almost guarantee it's going to be exactly one person's favorite movie this year. Is it me? Am I the one person?
Cats, available for the first time ever on video.